James Lindsay, who you may or may not know who he is. He is an outspoken and has been an outspoken voice against the critical social theories.
Yeah.
He was one of the first real prominent voices out there speaking against critical race theory, and then he migrated into other critical social theories. You know, he goes back to at least 2018, maybe farther. But if you go back on YouTube, there is a fascinating documentary where you see James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, and Peter Boghossian submitting what are called hoax papers to prominent feminist journals and other liberal journals. And what I mean by hoax papers is allegedly, and now I'm sort of doubting this, but they took ideas from critical social theories and didn't really do any real research, just created journal articles and cited other articles and other research. And they were able to get papers. I think they had maybe 8 or 9 papers that they got published under fake names in prominent journals.
Journal reviews.
Yeah. And so James Lindsay has this, and I think that goes back to about 2018. And again, there's a documentary on YouTube where you can go watch more about that.
He's the author of, or the co-author of the book Cynical Theories.
Yeah. James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. And he's written a couple other books since then. And he's very big on Twitter. He's a big Twitter following, or X following. So on Monday, there was an article published by the American Reformer, and I'm going to show you the X post from American Reformer. And it says, "Good morning. Welcome to a new week. We have a powerful article for you to start the start of your Monday. Marcus Carlson details how the liberal consensus is falling and the new Christian right is ascendant." In other words, ascending. The consensus is cracking apart. Take a look in the reply. The American Reformer is a fairly new website. It's just a couple of years old, and they post a lot of papers there. Some of them are more technical on issues related to what we might call the dissident right. We did a podcast last year. Maybe aspects of it might be what fall in line with what we called the woke right, although there's a big dispute as to whether or not the woke right is a real thing. Yeah, so I'm not going to get into all of that, but they're a very conservative, I would say, trying to be an up and coming voice for an alternative, conservative Christian perspective. All right. The article is called "The Liberal Consensus and the New Christian Right." Now you can barely make it out in the bottom left corner there. It says James Lindsay in some horrible red font, but that has changed since Monday. It did say Marcus Carlson, and this has been up since November the 18th. So it was up for a couple of weeks. So here's what happened. After the American Reformer posted this tweet that Marcus Carlson that they had published this article by Marcus Carlson, James Lindsay came on Monday, I believe, December 3rd. So that was yesterday. It was Tuesday morning. And I'm going to show you his first tweet. Now he's got like 100 tweets. But this was kind of the genesis of it. "As many of you know, I've been annoyingly critical of the so-called woke right. So up until now, these hoax papers from back in like 2017, 2018 were targeted toward the quote unquote woke left, we'll say. Lately, James Lindsay has been very critical about the woke right and been taking a lot of heat. It's not real. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. It's a boogeyman."
That's what his critics
are saying. Yeah. Whereas James Lindsay is like, no, it absolutely is a thing. He says, "But I haven't yet put substance to the accusation that it's really, quote unquote, woke. Well, I may have now. Like I did years ago with leftist academia, I have landed a hoax article against the woke right. And then there's a meme here of Karl Marx with a cross around his neck that looks AI generated. You can read about my little experiment here, but I'm also going to do a thread directly on X that explains the story. So what he did is that he took his claim is that he took roughly 6 pages of the Communist Manifesto, the preamble, and much of Chapter 1, modified it to put classical liberalism and the quote-unquote post-war liberal consensus in the place of the evil bourgeoisie and the so-called new Christian right in the place of the proletariat. Mm-hmm. To translate this into normal parlance now, the bourgeoisie would be the oppressors and the proletariat would be the oppressed. Okay. As you can easily verify, the language is pretty strongly maintained from the original Communist Manifesto, and the essential argument is identical. The American Reformer published an essentially communist, so woke, article for their own beliefs, agenda, and worldview, which is exactly the accusation that he made years ago against the quote-unquote woke left for publishing agenda-driven research. Yeah. That it wasn't actual research. It just fit the narrative, so they published it. And he's saying the same thing. He tricked a quote-unquote woke right entity into doing the same thing. The American Reformer is not a famous outlet. It is new, a publishing subsidiary of a Christian nationalist project called New Founding. It's not peer-reviewed academia. It's not the New York Times. It's simply not that big of a deal, but it is a leading publication in that niche, which I think is a fair way of saying it. I chose the American Reformer because of its status within that niche and because I had read some of the arguments they have published, recognized their woke structure, and knew I could flatteringly reproduce them. Obviously, it worked. I was right in my assessments. So this is the gist of the issue. Once the people at the American Reformer found out that Marcus Carlson, which is a twist on Karl Marx, if you get it, funny. It's a reverse. Yeah. Okay. The American Reformer added an editorial note to the article once they figured out that what had happened, and so they still have the article up there. Yeah. They still have the tweet up there that announcing it. The following article was written by James Lindsay, who is an avowed atheist and not eligible for publication in American Reformer. However, Mr. Lindsay originally submitted this article under the name Marcus Carlson. Okay. Lindsay used a passage from Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, stripping out its ideological substance, but retained. So here's their answer to what Lindsay did. He stripped out the ideological substance, but retained its powerful rhetorical structure. This was intended as a hoax, but is seemingly poorly conceived, given the undeniable power of Marx's rhetorical approach, as Lindsay himself acknowledged. So they're basically saying, we will concede that it's sort of loosely based on the Communist Manifesto with the rhetorical structure, but they
deny the ideology.
Exactly. So Bill Roach, who's a friend of ours, did a live stream already yesterday. He's friends with James Lindsay, commending it. Michael O'Fallon, they all seem to be kind of buddies. James Lindsay, Michael O'Fallon, and Bill Roach. And they seem to be saying the same thing about the woke right. I think similar to Neil's position. Yeah. I'm still a little bit more undecided. I'm still taking kind of a wait and see posture. I don't know where some of this is going. My thinking is getting more clear as I'm researching it, but I think that there's something to the argument, but also the movement as a whole is so diverse that I think some of these people, it's hard to peg and what stream are they actually in.
I would agree. I think what I see is the fruit of some people in some streams. And I think it's important to, figure out, well, what stream are you in? What are you actually saying?
Yeah.
But, a promotion of kinism or calling people, horrible names or saying that certain groups of people only have certain IQs. Like those things are blatantly racist, but they would also be in the camp that would, if we just had one large bucket, be considered the woke right.
So someone's asking on the stream, have you read the paper? Yes, I did read the paper this afternoon. And
I have not.
It is
yet,
in my opinion. Now we're in the realm of Krista's opinions. We've finished the historical story time. Okay, let me break in here. It's the next day after Monique and I recorded this conversation. I kind of felt like I didn't do a very good job yesterday of explaining some of my thoughts about the James Lindsay article. So I'm going to do a take 2 here and try to do it a little bit better this time. So what happened after all of this drama that's been unfolding on X? The guys at the American Reformer is, look, we didn't know it was James Lindsay, but we feel like the rhetoric itself stands, and James Lindsay is obviously taking it as like, see, you guys are the woke right. You published a big section of the Communist Manifesto. I just tweaked some of the wording. And so Lindsay has a whole write-up on this on his New Discourses website. This article explains what he did, Communist Manifesto for Christian Nationalists, Testing the Woke Right, and was published December 3rd. Now, there's been such controversy about whether this phenomenon called the woke right is even a thing. James Lindsay's been saying it's a thing. We've been saying we think it's a thing. And we detailed that on previous podcasts of where we see overlap and where we think that people on the right are actually using some of the ideas of the critical social theories to identify a different hegemonic power and a different oppressed group. I'm not going to get into all of that, but there has been considerable question of whether woke is the right term for them. Can you really be woke on the right, or is it inherently a leftist progressive type of a thing? And so part of James Lindsay's hope here, I think, is to prove that the woke right is really a thing by using the same strategy of getting this hoax paper published and trying to prove that there are grievances on the right and that they are trying to identify a different hegemonic power and a different oppressed group. But what I want to focus on in my comment is just a little bit of the comparison between what Lindsay got published over at American Reformer and the actual Communist Manifesto, which I have recently read the Communist Manifesto and had to work my way through it as part of my doctoral dissertation, because there is some connection between standpoint theory, which is the focus of my dissertation, and Marx's work. Like if you work all the way down to the bottom roots of the kind of intellectual family tree, Marx did play a role in standpoint theory. So I am somewhat familiar, but I have to say I was pretty hard pressed to figure out what part of the Communist Manifesto James Lindsay actually used. I spent a considerable amount of time trying to search on keywords and figure out what section it was. He said that he lifted 6 pages from chapter 1. And so I thought, well, this should be pretty easy. I should be able to do a comparison pretty easily. And I have to say, like, it was really hard. I was trying to find areas of commonality and where is this rhetoric and how does it compare? And now it's coming out, that it's been a day or two that approximately about 80% James Lindsay rewrote about 80% of the Communist Manifesto, the section that he lifted it from, and substituted words and that sort of thing. At what point is it an entirely different document? At what point is he not actually lifting something, but that he is coming up with something entirely different? And so when you scroll down in Lindsay's article, he does a little bit of his own side-by-side comparison. And quite honestly, I just don't think it works. I don't think that there's enough of the integrity of the Communist Manifesto left in Lindsay's article to make it a fair claim to say, well, Lindsay lifted these pages from the Communist Manifesto and trolled a far right group and got it published on their website. You know, I respect Dr. Lindsay. He's done a lot of good in the world in exposing very bad ideas and bringing them to light. But I think that he's making a little bit too big of a claim here. I don't think he's quite accomplished what he thinks he's accomplished. So let's just look at a couple of examples. You can make up your own mind. So here's a section from pages 36 and 37 from the Communist Manifesto, Chapter 1. This organization of the proletarians into a class and consequently into a political party is continually being upset again by the competition between the workers themselves. But it ever rises up again, stronger, firmer, mightier. It compels legislative recognition of particular interests of the workers by taking advantage of the divisions among the bourgeoisie itself. When we scroll down to the American Reformer version of this, what Lindsay wrote, this organization of the new Christian right. So you notice that he has put in the term new Christian right for proletarians. So this is what he did. Into a movement will continually be upset again by a competition of its various factions, but it is rising. So here's what it is continually being upset again by the competition between the workers themselves, is the original Communist Manifesto version. We take no enemies to the right and always redouble our efforts to the left. In that way, we will ever rise up again stronger, firmer, mightier from all of these contests. So if we scroll back up to the Communist Manifesto, we see the phraseology stronger, firmer, mightier, but then it doesn't really it doesn't really match. It compels legislative recognition of particular interests of workers by taking advantage of the divisions among the bourgeoisie itself. Lindsay's version says, we will win back our culture and take back our communities, and liberals can go ahead and thank themselves. These aren't very similar to me. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to claim I'm smarter than James Lindsay, but for me, when I did a side-by-side comparison of the Communist Manifesto with this article, I just don't see that there's enough resemblance left in the document to make the claim that he lifted 6 pages of the Communist Manifesto, switched out a few keywords, and got it published as an article. He did more than just switch a few keywords. It's significantly different. That's my take on it. Tell me what your thoughts are. I'll put the comments open on YouTube. Let me know what your thoughts are about this. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.